Hi, I'm Chris Gabbitas, Artistic Director of Phoenix Chorale, and I'm delighted to be here today speaking with Eric Holtan, who is the music director of True Concord, the other professional choral ensemble, the other large professional choral ensemble or chamber choir in Arizona. And we're having a chat today in advance of a very special project which the two ensembles are collaborating on during October 2024. It's the first time these groups have worked together. True Concord's been around for about just over 20 years now. Phoenix Chorale's been around a little bit longer, but only for about 30 years as a professional ensemble. And I'm delighted to welcome Eric Holtan. Good to see you, Eric.
Good to see you, Chris. Thanks so much for including me on this. I can't tell you how excited I am, how all of us at True Concord are excited about this collaboration. We've been talking about this for years, and finally it's happening, and I can't wait.
Yeah, we feel the same. And I think it was when I first joined the chorale in about 2019, I started reaching out to as many choral directors as I could around the state of Arizona. It's such a hotbed for choral music, and I didn't know many of the main players. And so I did my research and I reached out to you originally, and it's taken a few years, but we've had other concerns that have happened since 2019.
Right.
One of the things that I'm in awe of is the concept of a founder director, and of course, you are the person who you're entirely behind True Concord and the Genesis. And I wondered if you could speak for a few moments about how you came to found True Concord, where the name inspiration came from, and how your journey as an organization is going so far.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Yeah, 20 years. It's like, so where have those 20 years gone? I like to say that some people start companies in their basements or in their garages or in their dorm rooms. I started True Concord in the music library of the University of Arizona as I was staring out the window trying to type one page a day on my dissertation as I was finishing my degree at the university, thinking, what am I going to do next? But I'd always had this dream of having a professional group. And my studies at the U of A were special in that I was studying choral music, obviously, but I had the opportunity to minor in orchestral conducting. And at the U of A, there was a real emphasis on the choral orchestral masterworks. And so I was around these big pieces, and I just had a very special connection to and feeling about these works that integrate instrumentalists and singers. Don't get me wrong, I come from the Lutheran choral music tradition up in Minnesota. I have a deep affection for a cappella music, sacred a cappella music. But there was just something about bringing the two forces together in doing works like the Duruflé Requiem. I've had the great opportunity of doing the organ version of the Duruflé, done the chamber orchestra version of the Duruflé. Someday I'm going to do the full orchestra version of the Duruflé. But anyway, True Concord is Tucson's only professional chamber choir and orchestra. So we do a focus on the Masterworks, but also new music and especially American music. We've commissioned and premiered a number of works over the years. The other story I love to tell is so I'm back at the U of A, and I'm still a student, and I'm trying to staff this ensemble that I've started. And so I asked my pals from music school, and I say, we're going to have 4 rehearsals and 2 performances, and I'm going to pay you $100. I've got my business plan, I've got it all mapped out. And this is back in 2004, and grad students are like, $100, yeah, sounds great. So we had the rehearsals, we had the performances, they were very well received. Then I counted all the money, and I could only pay them $50. But as I like to say, we've been paying them more ever since, and it's been quite a journey with True Concord. But I'm just so grateful for this community, this Southern Arizona community, that has supported this organization, and through the Great Recession and through the pandemic, and we're standing tall.
I think that's extraordinary. And to pay the musicians right from the first performance is, I mean, that's extraordinarily noteworthy and laudable. I mean, even when I was back at university, we would put performances on as students, and even if you were a graduate, nobody would get paid. And I can remember, obviously from my time in the King's Singers, when that group was founded, they weren't paid for months, if not years, to start with. And then it was a little bit here, a little bit there. And I was involved in the early days of Voces 8 when they were still at university as well, and they were doing gigs for free as well. So it's really, really rare. And, I salute you on that. It's an extraordinary thing to do, but very, very important to acknowledge the value and the worth that musicians have. I think that's imperative. And so the early days of True Concord, the musicians were drawn just from U of A. How did you expand that to where it is now, where I believe you have some musicians from Arizona, but you also fly them in from out of state?
Well, we do. And, Tucson's a small market. It's not Phoenix. We're a fraction of the size of Phoenix. So there's a limited pool of professional choral singers. And so just by virtue of that, we've had to look beyond Tucson to staff our choir, because we've set a standard in terms of the kind of quality we want to achieve with our music making. And yes, we've been committed, as you said, from day one to paying our musicians a fair wage. It has been a journey, by the way, in doing that. In fact, as there are still people who come to concerts and, oh, your singers are paid. They're surprised that we'd be compensating singers, but no one would ever doubt whether instrumentalists would be paid. And so part of our mission has been to try to elevate in the public consciousness the status of the vocal musician on par with the instrumental musician. So that's been part of our focus. But in terms of staffing the choir itself, yes, we had to look elsewhere. We looked at and have had folks from Phoenix and from in western part of the United States, but we have people coming from New York and Boston and Chicago, and it's not a unique model. There are other organizations that do it. Again, I think out of necessity. It's certainly not because we don't like working with local people. It's just there are only so many local people who specialize, and let's face it, this is a real specialty. There's singing in opera, and that's its own art form. And so not all voices are cut out to sing in choirs, because in choirs you need to subjugate the individual for the sake of the whole, right? And that involves blending and matching with your neighbor. And that's a special art and technique that not everybody has, even though they may be a great singer.
Agreed. I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting for me to hear about the genesis and the growth of the ensemble, because it is very different to how Phoenix Chorale works, where we, as you said, we're lucky to be in a metropolis of many millions of people. And we have ASU, where you have U of A, and we do draw we draw our singers from some from NAU, some from U of A, some from ASU, because they gravitate towards Phoenix for work and to raise a family and to educate their children and whatever it might be. And so we are in a fortunate position where part of our mission is that we do work only with singers who are from that Phoenix metro area. And that presents us with huge benefits and strengths, in the sense that we have this tight-knit community, and we have friends and family who come from our singers regularly to make up part of our audience, and we work with that community quite closely. But equally, it's hugely beneficial, I think, to have the influence from across the states, from different markets, from different universities, from different states and different communities. And I'm hugely excited that we are giving both of our ensembles this opportunity to see how these other models fit within the choral landscape of the nation. And, we're going to amalgamate our forces, aren't we? We're not going to have Phoenix Chorale on one side and True Concord on the other.
That's right.
Get the voices and the people together. And particularly in the repertoire which you're directing, Frank Martin's incredible double choir mass, there's going to be immersion within our ensembles. And that's really exciting, because they're going to learn different the skills of singing alongside different singers and speaking about their journey within the choral music world and how their lives work. And I think it's a real sharing zone that I'm very, very excited to propagate and to give this opportunity for. So, that was in my mind, I think, when I reached out to you originally. I thought it's a chance for me to work with different musicians and different singers. It's a chance for True Concord to, perform a bit more in Metro Phoenix, which I don't think you do very often. And I was thrilled when, in fact, it was you who started this conversation and emailed me about 18 months ago, I think, to say, hey, what can we do? How can we put something together? And and then we heard about Camelback, didn't we? And speak a little bit about your relationship with Camelback and about the organ and how we came to put the project together.
Well, yeah, happy to. And I just want to echo what you said about bringing singers together. And you asked about uh, the genesis of True Concord. So I want to go back to that because it relates here. So the etymology of the word concord is hearts together. And the two words, true concord, are Shakespearean. It comes from his sonnet number 8, in which he describes music's power to bring people together.
Hmm.
And so this is what we do. This is what you do in Phoenix. This is what we do here in Tucson. This is what singers and choirs do everywhere, right? They come together through their shared passion and commitment and love for communal singing.
Yeah.
It is such a special endeavor that it's beyond voices combining. It's hearts combining. It's minds coming together. We talk about those pin drop moments, those moments, we've all had them. They're our drug of choice in our profession, right? When everybody in the room, audience and artists, are just perfectly still because you can hear a pin drop because everybody's mind and heart are in the same place at that one moment. That's what keeps us going back to the practice room and the rehearsals, because that is so powerful. And so when we bring these two choirs together and allow our experiences to allow our singers to have this experience of standing next to someone that they haven't stood next to, and experience their passion and their heart and their love, everyone is all the more rich because of it. And so I can't say enough about this idea of coming together and doing this thing that we do, which has such power to bring communities together, regardless of their backgrounds and all that is different about us. This is something that we all have in common. And music speaks that music is that universal language that speaks to us all. And so when you came back to, well, first when you first arrived and you were reaching out to me, and I was just glad to have you here, and knew lots about you, and of course your work with the King Singers, and just thrilled to have you here in Arizona. And you reached out and we were communicating about all kinds of things. Before you had arrived, I'd been talking with Charles about we should really do something together.
Yeah.
Phoenix Chorale and True Concord. But it was you who said, let's do this. And so I was delighted to hear that from you. And the fact that this performance, at least this project in part, is going to take place at Camelback is also very special. Honestly, I kind of discovered Camelback by accident, although it was through Guy Watley, who we've worked with many times, and we went up there and performed the Mozart Mass in C minor. And I just remember being absolutely gobsmacked at that incredible acoustical space
Yeah.
that is Camelback. It is a very, very special environment. And there's something just deeply spiritual about that space. And it's the acoustics and the light and the brightness of that space that is so conducive to opening one's heart into making music, that we've tried to come back there as much as possible. We've performed there a few times. We've recorded 2 albums there. One that we just released, an album of music by Jake Runestad, another one forthcoming, music of Jocelyn Hagan.
Mm-hmm.
And we pack everybody up and go up there. It's not the most convenient thing to haul up our whole operations to go up there, but it is so worth it.
Yeah.
Because it's such a unique and special place.
The acoustics are incredible, and I can remember when I first arrived in Phoenix, the then chief executive Jen Rogers taking me there, and as we were driving there, she seemed to have so much excitement and pride, and I didn't really know what to expect. And then when I walked in, it doesn't look like much on the outside, but you walk in and
Right.
it's almost like you're walking into some sort of Bond villain's underground lair, hewed out of very living rock. And there's a bit of glass and a bit of rock and a bit of wood. And there's several churches around Phoenix, which are some pinnacle Presbyterian churches, similarly incredible.
Yes.
But the acoustics in Camelback are extraordinary. And I don't know about you, but you know, we perform there several times a year. We've recorded there during my time. The one thing it was missing was a pipe organ. It didn't have a pipe organ. We couldn't do accompanied organ repertoire. We couldn't do organ recordings in there. And in fact, I had some organists who shall remain nameless saying, I'd love to accompany Phoenix Chorale. I'd love to collaborate with you, but if you're performing in Camelback, I won't do it.
Yeah.
And so this was a sense of loss, but the church knew it, and the church has been supportive of our ensembles. And Guy, of course, a wonderful organist who you mentioned, is supportive as well. And they knew that this was something missing. And so a couple of years ago, this project became apparent to us. It had been simmering away underground for a while, but the news broke that they were putting an organ in, a Fisk tracker, a very basic in terms of technology, but very wonderful in terms of musicology and musicianship, if you like, an organ building technique. And it was the most exciting thing. And I think from that point, the genesis of an idea took root in my brain. We must celebrate this. We must do something special. And it seemed like the great opportunity to work with True Concord. And I was delighted when you emailed me beginning of last year, because that was the opportunity we needed to have a springboard and say, yeah, let's make this is what we're going to do. Let's make it happen. And so that's it. So move to the repertoire for a bit. I can remember being very excited and saying, Eric, I want to do Duruflé Requiem. It's going to showcase the organ. Let's do that. What would you like to do with it? And you quite excitedly replied that you wanted to do
the Martin double choir mass.
Yeah, there you go. An amazing piece. I was just saying to you before we started recording that I've never sung this piece, which is crazy. I've always wanted to, and so I've actually you've graciously allowed that I might be able to sing along in one of the rehearsals, because it would be such a pleasure for me to. I'm excited about that. That's going to be great. But what does this piece mean to you, the Frank Martin double choir mass?
Oh, well, I mean, in a way that's an easy question. In another way, that's a hard question. I've been around this piece for years. I had the good fortune of singing it in my college choir. We won't say how many years ago that was, but it was a while ago. It made an incredible impact on me. And I didn't even know the story of the piece. I learned the story of the piece later, which just brings even more just sort of devastating impact. The music, there is a spirituality to this music. There is a power to this music that, as an undergrad, I think it just overwhelmed me when I had the opportunity to sing it. I just knew I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know how to tell others about it. You got to hear this piece. It's so cool. And then I learned the story about it, and Martin writing this piece, an endeavor that he described as being one between God and him, at one in which he obviously labored on it, but he did so in a very private, intensely personal way. He put it in a drawer. It didn't see the light of day for decades. Why is still inexplicable to me, because this is, in my opinion, one of the great choral masterpieces of the 20th century. It's hard as nails. It is a tour de force for a cappella choirs, for one choir to take it on, a choir of our size, 24 or 32 voices, is immensely challenging. The fact that we've got two really excellent choirs coming together for this project, it just seemed to me right away when you asked me what else we should do, we had to do this because we've got two great choirs. It's written for two choirs, so it is a mass. It is a mass as you expect it in terms of all of the text, the traditional liturgical texts, but it is written for two choirs, which is unusual. That hasn't been done many times. Ray Fun Williams, of course, wrote his G minor mass, double choir mass. That sounds like maybe another project we can do down the road, Chris.
That's a great idea.
But this piece, it is just has spoken to me a great deal. I did have the opportunity to perform it with the University of Arizona choir. We brought the UA Arizona choir and True Concord. Back then we were known as TUCSON Chamber Artists before we changed our name. And we did it. It was an excellent project. It was a little different than how we're doing our project, Chris. I conducted the Martin Mass one night, and my mentor, Bruce Chamberlain from the U of A, conducted the other night, which is one way of doing it. I like how we're going to do it because, one conductor, one interpretation of this piece, and then with you conducting the Duruflé and the Foray, our singers, the True Concord singers, get to experience your full interpretation of those pieces. So I think this is just an excellent pairing of compositions.
Well, thank you. And I think what struck me with how you described the piece and got me so excited was the way that it comes across in Martin's own voice as being a supreme act of devotion. It was an intimate compositional process between him and God. And in so many ways, with so many composers across the years, that has produced amazing results. I mean, I'm thinking in the 20th century again about Herbert House's Requiem, which was written as an act of devotion for his son Michael on his sad passing in an accident. And that work was never performed during House's lifetime either. And it was his widow who allowed it to be performed after his death. And we don't know if it's fully complete or realized in the way that House wanted it to, but it comes across so well. Yes. And that would be a good pairing for the Martin as well. We're not doing that, as you said, we're doing the Duruflé, partly because along with the Martin, it stands supreme amongst the works of the 20th century for choral musicians, but it has the added element of being worked for organ by one of the finest organ composers of the era, in my view, of all time. And this is a piece which has long captured my imagination. In fact, from when I was a child, when I was a very unsuccessful organ student, but I was enthusiastic for a few years, and my organ teacher was a man called Roger Sayer, he's famous now for having worked with Hans Zimmer on the Interstellar soundtrack, and he's a very well-known international recital organist, and he was a wonderful teacher and mentor, and he was a huge fan of French organ music, and he realized it brilliantly. And from studying with Marie-Claire Alain and working with Naji Hakim in Paris and all these incredible descendants of that school, he had almost a direct lineage to Maurice Duruflé, who was born in the late 19th century. So after composers such as Gabriel Fauré, whose Requiem he emulates slightly in terms of form, if not style.
Yes.
And Duruflé was a boy chorister at Rouen Cathedral, famous as the city where Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. He then went to study in Paris with Charles Tournemire, who was an incredible improvising organist. And most of his improvisations were based on Gregorian chant. And it was through Tournemire and also through the way that the French monasteries in the 19th century really revived the art of plain chant singing, and they contributed hugely to the liber usualis, the ordinary form of chant singing, which was used in the daily offices. And through this total immersion in cathedral life as a boy and in Parisian organist life, both with Tournemire, but also with Louis Vienne, another incredible organist and composer at Notre Dame, whose assistant Duruflé became. he developed this incredible love of plain chant and modal counterpoint, harmonic counterpoint writing. And that is what the Requiem is all about. It's not a big bombastic Requiem like Verdi's or Mozart's, or even Brahms's to an extent. It's much more intimate. It's much more supplicant in the way that it aims to provide a conduit between the musicians, the congregation, and heaven. And he almost intercedes for us, I think, as humans through the music and through the way that the lines work. And I've always loved modal writing. I love folk song for the same reason, but in sacred writing, I think modality is, and what we mean by that is the 7 modes of the scales, which if you're just for those listeners or watchers out there, if you're looking at a white note scale on C major, if you start and play the scale up, beginning on a C and then on a D, then on an E, and you just take it to its counterpoint an octave above, you'll go through the 7 modes. And Duruflé uses 2 or 3 modes and introduces different notes to indicate when we're shifting from one to the other. And in conjunction with his use of plain chant melodies, both in the organ and in the choir, we get this incredibly ethereal, impressionist feel, which was very, very fashionable at the time anyway. It was the 1940s and 50s he was writing. Originally as an organ piece on Gregorian chants, and then it became this Requiem. And it's just captivating. And I think it's one of the most beloved pieces of these organ and choir forces. I know he wrote it for orchestra originally. Unlike the Fauré, which I think works better with orchestra, the Duruflé, I think, for me, works better with just the organ alone. People disagree, but that's always been my feel. And so the chance to put these 2 pieces together with these incredible 48 singers, we're bringing in Jeremy Filsall from New York City, who's director of music organist at St. Thomas Fifth Avenue, incredible, globally renowned recitallist, organist, and choir trainer and musician. And I'm excited to work with Jeremy. And we've got PBS recording it. And also we're being joined by the Camelback Bible Church choir for a massed encore of Gabriel Fauré's Cantique de Jean Racine. So the number of ways in which this project is feeding and giving to us, it increases innumerably. There are so many elements to this: the collaboration, the learning, the devotion, the excitement, the promise of choral excellence in the Southwest, in the desert, but a hotbed of amazing artistic activity. It's going to be a project second to none for the area, really. And I'm really excited about that. And what would you say to people who are considering coming, or people who've already got tickets? What's the pitch from Eric for this project? Why should they come and join us in Phoenix and in Tucson?
Well, you've said so much, Chris, already, and really, really great stuff. This is a special program just by virtue of the fact that these 2 organizations are coming together. It highlights, as you suggested, that Arizona truly is a hotbed for choral music, great art and culture. We think of our professional sports teams and our collegiate sports teams as being the indelible aspects of the state, but truly our culture, our arts and culture, are just so amazing here. And the fact that this is this kind of, I almost think of this as like a summit, if you will, of these 2 groups who exemplify, if I may say, excellence in our art form in this country and beyond. And the fact that we're coming together, I think, in and of itself, it makes this an event that's not to be missed. But then there's the music that we're doing. And, sometimes folks may struggle with or find esoteric, a mass or a requiem. Well, a requiem sounds so depressing. It's this Requiem, and you compared it rightly to the Fauré Requiem. And there's a reason why these works are popular. And they're popular and for reasons that are similar, but also different from, say, the Verdi Requiem, which you mentioned, and the Mozart Requiem. We all know those works. In the Verdi and the Mozart, there's the bombast of the tuba mirdum and the dies irae, and there's this, God's wrath and judgment. Fauré and And Duruflé, they dispensed with those for the most part. There's references to it, but these composers, and Duruflé especially, through the modality, through the employment of the chant, and through the luscious harmonies, they're painting a very different picture of serenity and peace, of love that stands, I think, in contrast to way too many things we're getting bombarded with in today's culture, particularly in this, this political season. And there's just too many negatives that we're, especially in Arizona, being a crucial swing state where we can't turn on the TV, right, without seeing all kinds of political ads. This music is transcendent. It takes all of us to a different place, a place of beauty and harmony and peace and serenity. And of all of the Requiem settings, I think Duruflé does that the best. And then you've got the Martin with its deeply spiritual, poignant, but just plaintive and beautiful writing. I think attendees can expect an experience that will be uplifting, that will be joy-filled. They will leave feeling good about humanity and arts and culture, and especially in Arizona here, be proud of what we have in our cities and in our state, and just share this. They'll be able to walk away and share this beauty and this joy and this awe and this serenity with those with whom they live and work, and share this beautiful place in which we live.
I agree. I think there is so much white noise in our lives through the immediacy of communication devices, whether it's email or phone or on-demand television. And of course, these things are wonderful. And, they're some of the riches of everyday life if we don't let them control us. But the news is troubling in many ways. You have politics in America, we have politics in Europe, there's politics in the Middle East and the Far East. Everywhere you look, there's politics. And the Duruflé doesn't impose itself on us. It's almost like an arc which the very first measure emerges from silence and the very last measure recedes into silence. And it just sort of allows an osmosis into our lives for 25 minutes and hopefully leaves us feeling quite restored and positive. And I'm a huge lover of medieval Renaissance music and Gregorian chant and modality, as I said earlier. And I think the wonderful thing about it is it allows the rhetoric, the meaning of the words and the communication of the text really to come to the fore, because the monks who originated that monodic style of single line singing, they were led 100% by the text. The whole point of the music was to elevate that text for the glory of God within the acoustics of those incredible medieval, Gothic and Renaissance structures within which they were sung. And Duruflé takes that and he doesn't get in the way of it.
Right.
He embellishes it, but in an incredibly sensitive manner. And this is a composer who he composed 10, 20, maybe even 100 times the music that we actually have of his. He was such a stickler for perfection that we only have the tip of the iceberg of what the music he probably wrote. There's probably so much more that he burned or threw away or rejected. And we're lucky to have this because it encapsulates what could have been for the rest of his musical output. And I think for us as listeners, it encapsulates what could be for our lives. It encapsulates, any sort of troubles and stress and worries we may have. This music produces a beautiful, almost perfect antidote. And alongside the devotion of the Martin Mass, which you described so beautifully earlier, I think it's a very well-balanced program. I think we're going to bring a huge amount of heart and conviction to our performance of it. And I'm delighted we're doing it. It's such an honor to work with you, Eric, and with the organization. And
Likewise.
Our performance in Phoenix is going to be on the 3 o'clock on Sunday the 13th, Sunday the 13th of
Right.
October. That's right. And the TUCSON performances, if you could remind people, they're going to be on.
So our first performance is Friday afternoon, 3 p.m. at Catalina United Methodist Church. And then Saturday evening, 7 p.m. at Catalina United Methodist Church. Catalina United Methodist, one of the special spaces that we have here acoustically in Tucson, and a terrific organ as well there. And we encourage everybody to come out. And for those who are observing Yom Kippur, there is that that space between the performances that we have deemed off limits and sacred. And so you can come to an afternoon concert on Friday or the evening concert and on Saturday and observe Yom Kippur in between.
Absolutely, and that's very important to us that we help to observe that holy day. I mean, the thing about the Mass and the Requiem is that they are for everybody. They're for anybody, no matter what faith or belief. They're a way of communing with, even though they're Christian works originally, I think they would help anybody commune with whatever higher power it is that we seek comfort from in relation to our everyday lives. And we hope that the essentially humanist sound of voices helps to transport anybody and everybody to wherever they need to go. So we do hope to see as many of you there as possible. So Friday the 11th, Saturday the 12th in Tucson, and then Sunday the 13th at Camelback in Phoenix. Eric, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to hear your wisdom about the repertoire. It's lovely to hear more about True Concord's foundation and the progress you've made over the years to be one of the preeminent ensembles in the whole of North America, without a shadow of a doubt. And I will see you in a few weeks, and I'm tremendously excited about the whole project. So great to speak to you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Chris, and I echo your sentiments. Thank you for your high compliments. It is truly an honor to partner with you and your organization.